We have been studying the mind and its relationship to this thing called the heart, which is the center of our being. We started this 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, you remember that we looked at Proverbs 23, verse 7, that says, as one thinks, so that person is. And the Apostle Paul expands on that idea when he says in Romans 12, verse 2, that when you become a Christian, there has to be a transforming of the mind. A transforming of the mind. And so that day we looked at who I am and how I act in its relationship to my mind. And then last week we saw that the mind in the Bible is closely related to what the Bible calls the heart, the center of our being. And as I studied the relationship between the mind and the heart, I saw that the Bible uses the word heart in other ways as well. The word heart is used to talk about the will. The word heart is used to talk about the emotions. The word heart is used to talk about my values, and the word heart is used to talk about my faith. And so I came up with that little diagram at the bottom of that handout that I had, where I gave you 30 passages, 6 for each of those 5 spokes, I called them, on that wheel. The mind, the will, the emotion, the values, the faith. That wheel that shows that all of those spokes, those 5 things, those 5 parts of me are expressions of my inner being called the heart. And we saw last week out of Proverbs 4, verse 23. Proverbs 4, verse 23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Everything you do flows from it. And so I came up with that diagram of the wheel. And I didn't like my drawing. Remember I said the outer rim, which represents the Christian life, I drew at the bottom of a coffee cup. And then the inner part, the circle, the hub, I drew with a quarter. And then I hand drew I checked in with our granddaughter Elizabeth this week, and I said, could you draw me a wheel? Because she's an artist. And so she drew me a wheel. Look at that, isn't that nice? Wow, woo! She's been up here before, and remember she did the artwork on the different pieces of furniture in the tabernacle. But this expresses it very well. The hub is the heart. The rim is the Christian life. And we have faith, mind, will, emotions, and values. Let's just keep that up there for a moment. Because again, this wheel expresses the fact that I have these important sections or parts of my being, all of which come together. And so I ended the message last week by saying that what we do in the one area impacts the other 4. So, for example, if I am feeling a certain way, that could change my will, and my will could change my values, and as I change my values, that adjusts my faith as well as the way that I think in my mind. Or if I make a decision in my will then will impact how I think, my mind, which is rooted in my faith, which impacts my value system. You get the idea. They all fit together. So no matter where you start on the wheel, you're going to impact the other parts. Now that could be a very positive thing. It could be a very positive thing. For example, I might decide in my mind that I'm going to come to church this morning. And maybe somebody is here, you haven't been to church for months in your mind, but that was a decision of the will. And now that you're here, hopefully you're feeling happy. That's the emotion. And maybe you're even going to reaffirm your faith in Jesus Christ and change some of the ways that you live, which is your value system. And so again, as it says in Proverbs, out of the heart are all of the different issues and behaviors of life. Okay, we can take the wheel down now. But what I want to emphasize this morning is that for many people, and by the way, this is not just my idea, but as I read things about the Christian life by Christian authors, this is brought up again and again. But for many people, emotions tend to drive them. And that could be a very innocent and simple thing. Emotions, that is how I feel or what I want. So yesterday, I felt and desired to have lunch. And I wanted an egg. And I felt last night the desire to go to bed early, so I would be fresh and hopefully vibrant this morning. And so I wanted a good night's sleep. See, those are feelings, those are emotions that, of course, get tied in with the will and so forth. But those are emotions that are simple, they're good, they're fine, they're healthy. But it's also very possible that a person's emotions get them moving down the wrong pathway. And so listen to this kind of language. Someone might say, I don't feel like going to church. And by the way, now I'm not talking about those of you watching this morning. Maybe you're in a retirement home, you can't get out, you don't drive, you're on vacation, whatever, or you're still very concerned about COVID and all of that. We're not, okay, I'm not talking about that. But someone might say, I just don't feel like going to church. And so I don't. Or I don't feel like being married to this person anymore. I don't feel like it. And therefore I don't want to be married. I don't want to go to church. Someone might say, I feel like trying marijuana. Or I watch all these gambling commercials on television and I feel like giving it a try. Now, these are feelings that somebody might not thoroughly analyze. Going back to the wheel again, they might not thoroughly analyze in what way or another they're rooted in or not rooted in their faith, their value system, but they begin to operate simply out of a matter of I don't feel like going to church this morning. Or I don't feel like being married to this person anymore. I don't feel like going to work. I don't feel like going to bed on time, even though I know that tomorrow morning I'll wake up tired and be cranky. I don't feel, or I do feel like, and the feelings then become linked and associated with something that is damaging, something that violates who I am in my faith and my value system. It violates who I am as a Christian. On the bottom of your bulletin, by the way, we did a one-page bulletin. Not a lot of activities going on right now. There will be later. But the bottom of your bulletin, and those of you who are watching online, I think that this can be put up on the screen. You'll notice that we put a thought on it. And on the one side it says worried, negative, and worldly. That's how people feel. That's how they feel. And on the other side, peaceful, positive, and eternal. And that's how people feel. Now, a person might say, I feel negative, angry, depressed. I feel anxious. I feel a lot of fear. And when a person begins to feel those kinds of emotions, it could very well get them off track in terms of their faith and their happiness and their joy. We began this morning singing, joyful, joyful, drive the doubt and fear away. But the thing is, maybe you watch the news and you come away from watching the news feeling fear. And that begins to impact the way that you feel and live the rest of the day. Or maybe you feel a certain way when somebody does something that irritates you and you have a knee-jerk reaction. Somebody cuts you off. I had it yesterday. I was driving along, going the speed limit, and this muscle car comes up behind me, just hanging right on my tail end, and then I heard the roar of engines or engine, and it came roaring around me, and then cut right in front of me. Apparently disgusted that I was going so slow, going the speed limit. And the knee-jerk reaction, that is the feeling, could have been to shout and scream, even though the person couldn't hear me, but shout or swear at them or have some inappropriate gesture, maybe out the window. See, our feelings. Now, when I say feeling, like at the bottom of the bulletin there, worried and negative, or maybe feeling depressed, I'm not talking now about people who have a chemical imbalance in their brain. They need to have professional care. They need to have a doctor. They need to have medical attention. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody who just wakes up in the morning, maybe you slept a little wrong, you got a stiff neck, and you just don't feel very good, and I'm just going to have a bad day. I know I'm going to have a bad day. And so you live that day having a bad day. See, feeling, emotion, they can impact our morals, they can impact our behavior so quickly. Or as I said before, I don't feel like being married, or I don't feel like going to church, or I don't feel like being a Christian. Drive the doubt and fear away, we sang earlier. So as I said before, there are many Christian authors who are very concerned about people, Christians, letting feelings or emotion take over, and they don't analyze the other spokes on the wheel. That is, what impact is this going to have overall in my eternity, my faith? What impact is it going to have on my value system, my lifestyle, my will, how I make decisions? Just operating out of feelings. Just, this is how I feel. What's important to see is that Jesus teaches that we are not to root our lives simply in feeling. Now, I'm not talking about, I felt like having an egg or I felt like having lunch. But in terms of the deepest things in life and the way that I react to people, the way that I live my day, the way that I carry out my activities and my relationships with my spouse, with family members and friends, those deepest things in life must not be rooted in emotion. They need to be rooted in what Jesus teaches us. That's what he says in Matthew 28. Now, Matthew 28, starting at verse 18, is what we usually call the Great Commission. And when we think of the Great Commission, we usually think about missions, which we should. Go out into all the world and make disciples of all nations. Jesus came to his disciples. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And, now notice, this is the part that we sometimes leave out. Teaching them to obey everything, Jesus says, that I have commanded you. So see, what if I say I'm a Christian, but my feelings violate or run in opposition to what Jesus has taught me? One of the great Christian writers over the past couple of decades is a man named Dallas Willard. You may not have heard of him, kind of one of those guys that sometimes ministers read, but he's a great author. He writes some really good Christian stuff. And he gave a speech, and that speech was printed, and Pastor Kirsch, who has the sermon in the second service. He's going to be using that as well. He came across a printed copy of that message, that speech that Dallas Willard gave. It was a speech on spiritual formation. And he said, what you need to do is you need to study the Word of God and develop your will according to what you learn, Matthew 28, according to what I have taught you, says Jesus. You have to develop your will, and you have to have what he called a reflective will. That is, you sit down and you think about it. And then as you think about it, as you think about your will, as it's related to your faith and as it related to your value, those spokes on the wheel, as you reflect on your will, more and more you try to incorporate that will into your mind and into the way that your body actually reacts to life. He calls it an embodied will. So that yesterday when that muscle car sped by me, and I've been working on this, I said, okay, what's your knee-jerk reaction? You have an embodied will. You've been working on that this week. And I said, this guy or woman, the windows were dark. Maybe he's having a bad day. Lord, bless this person and give them some peace. They need to get mad at somebody, and they picked me because I drive the speed limit. And so I have some, see, you embody a will that has been trained according, Matthew 28, according to what Jesus teaches. It's an embodied will so that your whole system, your emotions, your blood, your brain, your thoughts, your being, more and more becomes what Jesus teaches. That's what he says in Matthew 28. You just do that. You wake up on Sunday morning and you say, well, do I feel like going to church or not? You just get up in the morning and you say, that's what I do. That's me. That's who I am. See, that's who I am. And in order to do this, you have to have that intentionality. That is, you reflect on it. That Dallas Willard says, reflective will. You reflect on it. You think about it. You pray about it. You meditate on it. And of course, you read the Bible. If you're going to do what Jesus says to do, you've got to read the Bible, go to Bible study, you have some kind of a devotional plan. You've got to know the Bible. You've got to know what he teaches. If somebody says, I'm a Christian and I believe the Bible. I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible. Yeah, I do. I believe the Bible. But I don't feel like going to church. Well, what about Hebrews where it says do not neglect going to church? Oh, I didn't know it said that. Yeah. If you knew the Bible and you reflected on your will, that would become part of your being. Become part of your being. The Apostle Paul talks about this very interesting passage in Galatians 4, verse 19. Galatians 4, verse 19 says, my dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth. He really hurts for them. He really loves them and hurts for them. He says, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. You see what he's saying? He says, I'm concerned about you until your inner being, that is your body, your whole being, your whole self, becomes Christ. Or as he says in another passage, no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. But there has to be intentionality. You have to think about it, pray about it, read the Bible. Okay, reflective will, embodied will, become who I am. I decided to give this a try, do a little experiment. I lease my cars. And my lease ran out, so I got a new car. And this one, on the dashboard, it's really something else. The computer tells me what gas mileage I'm getting, depending on how I'm driving. And I noticed that depending on how I'm driving, the gas mileage will be anywhere from 17 miles to the gallon to 23. So the more I gun it, and see, I feel like gunning it. That's the way I am. I feel like accelerating when I'm going down the hill on Perkins. I don't know if you've been on Perkins. I feel like going fast. I like that. I feel good about it. But then I also noticed that it went from 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16 miles to the gallon. So I thought, okay, all right, I'm gonna begin to intentionally go the speed limit. I got that baby up to about 22 miles to the gallon, even in the city. I'm going the speed limit. It's become part of me. And if cars had long feathers on their front grille work, if they had long feathers on their front bumpers, boy, my back bumper would be well polished by now. Because when you go the speed limit, boy, do they hang on your tail end. Whew. My goodness, it was probably why this muscle car went around me, I think. But now it's becoming part of my being. I'm finding that I just automatically go the speed limit. And see, I think that's what the Apostle Paul is, and that's what Dallas Willard is talking about. He says you have an embodied will. So when you wake up in the morning, you say, no, I don't feel so good. I feel kind of depressed. I feel kind of, wait a minute. And then you reframe it. If you wonder why we have the picture up here. You reframe it. So you wake up in the morning, can you see it over there? You wake up in the morning, dark. Reframe it. Now I realize there are times in life when we need to be scared, we need to be worried, health issues. Sure, not trying to minimize that. The doctor says you've got diabetes, you've got cancer, or you need surgery, you have to have your colon out. You don't go, yippee, I'm gonna reframe it. I'm talking now about normal everyday living. So you wake up in the morning feeling grumpy, and you know that you've got to deal with other family members. Well, you have embodied a will that has been taught according to what Jesus wants for your life, and so you reframe it. Remember what we sang at the beginning? Fill me with the light of day. Fill me with the light of day. See, it's easy to sing, you know. Joyful, joyful, fill me with the light of day. And tomorrow morning you wake up grumpy and bite off everybody's head. No, not if you have an embodied will where you reframe it. I like this. Somebody donated this painting to us a couple weeks ago, and Sherry Mewson did some work on it. She made the dark darker and the light. So, dark, light. Reframe it. The person who says, I don't feel like being married anymore. Maybe some work needs to be done. Have you embodied a will that says, wait a minute, I made vows in sickness and in health to love and to cherish. Yeah, but, no. Have you worked on it? Let's go back to the wheel. Put that wheel up there again. See, your emotions are driving you. I don't feel like being married anymore. But wait a moment. Your emotions are linked in with all of these other things, like the will. Have you embodied a will that says, I want to do what Jesus teaches? Okay? And now, I'm not denying the fact that some marriages have to come to an end. There's abuse, there's disaster, there's all, but at the same time, talked to somebody this past week, said, I was convinced ought to be divorced, convinced. But then I really began, thinking, what really is my heart when it comes to this person to whom I'm married? What do those vows mean? In sickness and in health. You complain? I did darks yesterday. I did whites and shirts the day before. I did darks yesterday. And I have to do that with a song, right? Because in sickness and in health, what is my embodied will? Say, well, I don't feel like being a Christian anymore. Well, wait a moment. Have you really read the scriptures? Have you really embodied the will of God within you? Have you really prayed for the Holy Spirit to lead and guide? Have you gone to all of the spokes and really searched your mind, searched your faith, the scriptures, your will? Are you letting your emotions drive you? So an embodied will means, as Paul said in Galatians, that passage let's put that up there again. Galatians 4:19, really beautiful passage. My dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. You don't just become a Christian in your head, become a Christian in your heart. Christ is formed in you. So my will, my emotions, how I react to people, what I think of my marriage, going to church, believing in Jesus, how I act at work, how I act towards my neighbors, the kind of language that I use when people cut me off because I'm going the speed limit. Is Christ formed within me? And it happens when I have a reflective will, when I have a method of focusing, concentrating on the scriptures, the Spirit, prayer, meditation, and then intentionally putting that into practice so that after a while, being Christ-like becomes not second nature, but becomes my human nature.